The next segment that we want to talk about is personality disorders. And I thought we would once again start with a question. A 20-year-old is admitted to the hospital. He has a history of delinquent acts, such as breaking into the homes of family friends and taking their sports equipment or cars without permission. He has considerable charm and presents reasons for his behavior that he perceives as rational. He fails to see any defect in his behavior. It is important to include which of these measures in his care. Now, before we look at the choices, I want you to tell me what's wrong with this patient. So they describe his behavior, and this behavior is classic antisocial behavior. So we want to, as we're looking at the answers, think about antisocial behavior. Now, so which is important to include in his care? Number 1, planning activities for him that he selects. Number 2, maintaining set limits on his behavior. Number 3, planning levels of activity he must achieve before advancing to more independent behaviors. And number 4, promoting his self-image by having him direct selected group activities. Now, you know that antisocial patients are usually very manipulative and impulsive in behavior. So the correct answer is number 2, maintaining set limits on his behavior. Another question for us. A young man who is admitted with antisocial behavior seeks the attention of a young, attractive nurse, and he finds many excuses to involve the nurse in conversation. The nurse should have which of these understandings of this situation? The nurse, 1, should help him in any way possible. 2, is responsible for maintaining a therapeutic relationship with him. 3, should prepare to act as an advocate for him. Or 4, is uniquely able to gain his confidence. Now, it looks to me as though this young antisocial man is trying to be manipulative with this nurse. The answer to the question is number 2. You are responsible for maintaining a therapeutic relationship with this patient, not a social one. It should be a therapeutic relationship. Let's look at another question. An antisocial client begins to behave in all of the following ways. Which behavior indicates an improvement in his condition? Number 1, he offers a detailed plan for a recreational activity. Number 2, he expresses his anger directly at a person who frustrated him. Number 3, he expresses sincere concern about the depressed affect of another client. Or number 4, he offers logical explanations for his past delinquent behaviors. Now, an improvement in the behavior of an antisocial client would be answer number 3. He expresses sincere concern. Antisocial patients don't think about anybody but themselves. The world centers around themselves. Now, we had a choice in there that said he offers a detailed plan for a recreational activity. Nothing wrong with his thought process. He could do that before. That's not an improvement. He could do that upon admission. Number 2, he expresses his anger directly. He's very good at expressing anger directly. In fact, these patients often become violent. They can become even homicidal. And number 4, he offers logical explanations for his past delinquent behaviors. Sure, he says something like, you weren't using your car. I needed a car. I took it, so what's the big deal? You weren't wearing your watch. I needed a watch. So what's the deal? You can't wear 2 watches at once. So he offers logical explanations for delinquent types of behaviors. In short, he has no conscience. Now, there's 2 types of personality disorders that we're going to talk about for NCLEX. Antisocial, which is exemplified by the questions we've just done. And we're also going to talk about borderline. There are some other types of personality disorders, but they're not likely to show up on NCLEX, so we're going to focus on these 2. Both antisocial and borderline patients tend to be impulsive and manipulative. One of the big differences, though, is that the antisocial patient likes himself. He thinks he is just about perfect. So he doesn't see any defects in his behavior. The antisocial patient thinks they're just perfect. That antisocial means they don't like society's rules, not that they don't like people. So they don't like society's rules. They have no conscience. In the very beginning, they can be quite charming, but they have trouble with long-term relationships. They lie. They don't have any sense of truth. They have no conscience, so it doesn't matter whether they tell you the truth or not. They could sell you a used car that falls apart 2 miles down the road, and they could just bald-faced tell you this is the best car driven by a little old lady every alternate Sunday. Only got 5,000 miles on it, even though it's 15 years old. Only got 5,000 miles. Best deal going. And then it falls apart and causes a terrible accident for you, and everything they told you was not true. But this would be typical of antisocial personality. They're often very intelligent, but they're not using that intelligence wisely. Now, borderline patients, on the other hand, are manipulative, impulsive, but they have a very poor self-image. They don't like to be left alone. They're much more apt to be suicidal, whereas the antisocial patient might be homicidal. The borderline patient is frequently prone to mood swings. They have difficulty with proper expression of anger. They can get extremely out of control with their anger. Now, with both of these types of patients, a major nursing care is going to be set limits. Set limits. Any manipulative, impulsive behavior, set limits. With the borderline patients, be sure you observe for suicide assessment because they are much more prone to commit suicide. These patients are difficult to have on a unit because they tend to try and split the staff. So they may say to you, "You're the night nurse." And they'll say to you, "Night nurse, you are the best nurse out there. Do you know what those day nurses do?" And then go on to describe how mean the day nurses are. Now, over here we have the day nurse. And they might say, "Day nurse, you are so good to us. Do you know what those night nurses do?" And so they may actually play one staff member against another. They're actually quite good at doing that. So the staff needs to be very alert to that because they can make chaos on a unit. Let's do another question. A 75-year-old woman has been widowed for 12 years. She was forced to vacate her apartment several months ago when fire destroyed the building. She's been wandering about the city, begging for money to buy food, and sleeping on park benches or in secluded areas of large buildings. She carries her personal belongings in 3 bundles. One day she enters the bus terminal and becomes very noisy and quarrelsome. The police are called and she is brought to the psychiatric unit. To plan care for this woman, which of these actions should be taken first? Number 1, determine her interests. Number 2, obtain information about her family. 3, identify her emotional needs. Or 4, evaluate her physical condition. And the correct answer to this question is number 4, physiology before psychology. Now, this woman may, in all likelihood, be a borderline personality. But the first thing you need to do is check her physical condition to make sure that this 75-year-old woman does not have anything from heart disease to head lice. So we need to check her physical condition first.